we can go. Do you have any questions, colleagues, before getting there? And maybe one more thing that I will introduce you as Mr. Pleshinger or Professor Fyodor. But do you mind if during the discussion I call you on your first name from time?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Gyula, Boguslav, Martin, and Svatopluk. Many thanks. Okay, then...
or you can call me Svatya. It's short.
Svatya. Svatya? Can I?
Svatya.
Okay.
Of course.
Yes, Svatya. Okay, yes, I saw that you signed it like that, but I was a bit cautious to to go for it immediately.
Thanks.
Svatya. Okay, excellent. I'm asking our masters in Budapest whether we can start.
Yes.
We can. Okay. Then let's go. So good afternoon, dear Mr. Presidents, dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen in front of our YouTube stream. First of all, let me introduce myself. I am Gábor Iván. I am president of the EU section of the Hungarian Economic Association. And this event is hosted by the Hungarian Economic Association. The chair, the president of our association, Mr. Gyula Pleshinger, was kind to invite me to moderate this meeting, and what I accepted with pleasure and honor. Our title is V4 Alliance, Economic Results and Prospects. Let's have a little bit of look into the past. Actually, on the 15th of February, we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Visegrad Declaration, which was signed by President Václav Havel, President Lech Walesa, and Prime Minister József Antall. This regional cooperation actually is rooted in the distant past of the history. In the same royal palace in Visegrad, in 1335, the King of Hungary, Károly Róbert, the King of Poland, Kazimierz III, and the King of Bohemia, Jan Lucemburski, established an economic and political alliance based on the common interests of the regions of their kingdoms. Well, many centuries passed, and after changing the political system in 1989 in Central Europe, the renewed recognition of our common fate, our common interests and values was just natural and mutually appreciated. And the slogan of the heroic Polish legions during the Napoleonic Wars regained its meaning: for your liberty and for ours. Dear colleagues, I would like to welcome our speakers, and I would like to introduce to you our participants in this panel. First of all, I would like to warmly welcome our host, Mr. Gyula Pleshinger, the president of the Hungarian Economic Association. Gyula has a vast experience in financial institutions and also in the central administration. He served as state secretary at the Ministry of National Economy. He was chairman of the supervisory board of the Budapest Stock Exchange, member of the board of the International Securities Market Association, chairman of the board of directors of the Government Debt Management Agency, permanent member of the Regional Consultative Group of the Financial Stability Board in Basel, deputy governor of the World Bank and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, just to mention some of his previous and present functions. And presently, Mr. Pleshinger is a member of the Monetary Council of the Hungarian National Bank. He was appointed in 2013, and he is also president, as I mentioned, of the Hungarian Economic Association since 2017. From Poland, we have Professor Boguslav Fyodor, who is the Deputy Dean for Foreign Cooperation, formerly the Academy of Economics of the Wrocław University. And previously, he was also Dean of the university for 2 terms. He is director of the Institute of Economics, and is member of the Senate, chairman of the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee for 3 terms. Professor Fyodor is very active in many academic fora. He is member of the European Association of Environmental and Resource Economists. He was chairman of the Committee of the Economic Studies of the Wrocław branch of the Polish Academy of Science. He was member and deputy chairman in the Council of the Social and Economic Strategy of the Government. And he is deputy chairman of the Committee of Economic Studies of the Polish Academy and chairman of the Science Committee, deputy chairman of the Science Council of the Institute of Economic Sciences, and chairman of the Science Council of the Polish Economic Society. And this is not an exhaustive list. From the Czech Republic, or Czechia, we have Svatopluk Kapounek, another professor, an associate professor at Mendel University in Brno. He's a program director for finance and financial management and the vice dean of research at the Faculty of Business and Economics. He also serves as president of the Czech Economic Society. He is a member of the European Economic Association, the Econometric Society, the American Economic Association, and the Euro Area Business Cycle Network. Main areas of his research include monetary economics, international finance, corporate finance, financial markets, and applied econometrics. From Bratislava, we have Mr. Martin Kahanec, who is replacing the president of the Slovak Association, because the president of the Slovak Association, Mr. Eduard Baumol, was not able to join us today for a sad reason. But we very much welcome here Mr. Martin Kahanec, who is a former president, recent president of the association. Mr. Martin Kahanec is also a professor and acting dean of the School of Public Policy at the Central European University in Vienna. He is founder and scientific director of Central European Labour Studies Institute in Bratislava. He is an affiliated scholar and member of the advisory board of the Global Labour Organization, affiliated researcher at the Center of Population Development and Labour Economics in the United Nations University in Maastricht and University of Economics in Bratislava. He was Deputy Program Director Migration and Deputy Director of Research at the Institute of Labour Economics in Bonn and Visiting Research Fellow at the Harvard University's Labour and Work-Life Program. He is an elected member of the Academia Europaea, the European Academy of Humanities, Letters and Science. And as I mentioned, Mr. Kahanec has recently been the president of the Slovak Economic Association between 2016 and 2018. So, dear colleagues, I warmly welcome you to this debate. And now, if you allow me, I would go to some questions what I would like to ask you to answer. I will present these questions to you, and I will invite all of you to share with us your thoughts. And dear ladies and gentlemen who are following us in front of your YouTube screens, you will be able to send us further questions. I will gather them, and I will ask our speakers to answer your questions at the end of our panel debate. So, let's start. My first question is about the changes, the historic changes what happened 3 decades ago. So, our countries managed to change their economies from centrally planned ones into free market economies. This change was not without sacrifices. There were no manuals to guide the decision makers. The changeover of the economic and institutional system, the reintegration into the Western trade relations were done in an unprecedented way in a very short period of time. So, dear colleagues, what do you think? What are the most challenging features of the changes? And what are the lessons learned with an effect even today? If you allow me, first I would like to ask the president of the Hungarian Association, dear Gyula, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. Well, I think the biggest challenge was, as you correctly pointed out, the timings. We wanted to make the changes to join the market economies as fast as possible. We were prepared for the changes intellectually, but I'm afraid less in professional terms. We gave up our Eastern markets almost from one day to another, even the then Soviet market, which was indeed very important for our industry and trade. And now or then hardly could find new markets for our stuff. We adopted the view that even the worst private ownership is better than the best state ownership, so started to privatize our economy, including also the strategic lines like energy, water, communication. And we did it sometimes for nuts. Some other time, we were a little bit late to realize that the investors, when paying the price for a company, in fact, bought the market. This is how we lost, for example, our sugar production and were forced to start importing. And this is how we lost the control over the energy prices, and I could continue. Well, certainly, it is not to put the blame on anyone. I do suppose that the responsible people of those times did their best. It is, however, true that our economy, our budget has paid the price for the transition. Between 1990 and 1994, our debt to GDP increased by almost 50%, peaking at 91%. We had negative GDP growth rate and deteriorating current account balance. Then between 94 and 98, the debt to GDP ratio started to improve and the growth moved to the low greens on account of the privatization of the energy sector and a lot of other inflows for FDI and financial investors. I would say our economy in fiscal terms has recovered from the transformation-related shock by 2000, 2002, but the reacquisition of the strategic industries happened only after 2010. So when it comes to the takeaways, no doubt we have learned the different techniques of privatization. It is, however, highly unlikely that we could use this expertise in the future. It is something like the case with the broker and the client. So at the beginning of the relation, the broker has the knowledge, the expertise, the client has the money, and when they finish, then the broker has the money and the client has the expertise. But we have a more important takeaway, and this could be that a closer cooperation among our countries within the Visegrad group could have improved our negotiating potential, and this could be true for the future as well. We have indeed very good success stories in our cooperation. Well, I mean the successful NATO and EU accession. I could even mean the establishment of CEFTA, which now serves different purposes, but we established the Visegrad Fund, which is quite successful. And I think that we have a pretty fruitful cooperation in the course of the EU budgetary procedure and other EU stuff. So it certainly would worth further strengthening this cooperation. And another point could be the importance of the reciprocity in business. The importance of focusing on our own interests and build up economic relations on the basis of the mutual benefit. I have a long time been of the opinion myself that whenever our government makes a deal with an FDI investor or even grants some subsidy for a large Hungarian company, an important condition should be prospective investor or large company committing itself to help the Hungarian SMEs to become possibly tier 1, tier 2, or the highest possible level vendors. So I think this is from my side now, and then let's go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Gyula. Now I will invite Professor Fyodor. Dear Boguslav, the floor is yours. Dear Boguslav, I think you are muted. Dear Boguslav, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we cannot hear you. I have a message that your microphone seems to be on. Dear Boguslav, may I ask you to switch off and switch on again, and that might help, might solve the problem. If you could. Because we cannot hear you. Maybe that I'm afraid that maybe Boguslav even doesn't hear us. Thank you, Yula. So, dear colleagues, sorry for this little technical issue. We'll solve it immediately.
And it will be the best solution, I think.
Dear Boguslav, you are back. Welcome. We can now hear you. I'm sorry for
I'm
this.
back?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm very sorry. So now you can hear me, yes?
Yes, excellent.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm sorry for that disturbance, but I have no idea what happened, because maybe you didn't hear, but I said that this is my third online event today using the same computer, and for the first time this technical problem. Okay, but thank you, and once again, excuse me for some inconvenience. So let me start. So I prepared a more general answer to your first question, because I find this question the most general of what you have prepared for today. So I would like to start the answer with, first of all, I would like to say that I don't consider the transformation process as a homogeneous one. So the countries, our countries, and not only our countries, differ a lot in terms of in many terms, in many categories. So answering that question, I would like to recognize three general models of transformation from former socialist, or as I prefer to say, command and control economies, to a market economy. So first of all, this is the model of capitalist revolution, which I alternatively define as a quick liberalization model. Then we have, in my classification, the model of gradual evolution, which is, for example, the case of Bulgaria and Romania, till at least I think the middle of 90s. And then this is the so-called Madeleine through model, being characteristic by a very late start to the liberalization, mostly oligarchic model of privatization, and subsequently quick development of the state capitalism with all its negative consequences. First of all, this is the case of many post-Soviet republics, including also Central Asian ones. I think that first and furthermore, and apart from some specific differences, also referring to differentiations in economic, political, and social history during the time of communism and planned economies, the V4 countries belong by and large to countries which in the beginning of 90s have chosen the model of which I described as capitalist revolution. Apparently, they have been and still are differences between our countries, referring to such important components of the transformation process, like, I would like to be very brief, reforms of the legal and administrative system. First of all, in order to establish formal institutions necessary for proper performance of market economy. Secondly, liberalization of prices and trade, with a quick opening of our countries to the competition on the single European market. Thirdly, rearrangement of banking and monetary system and the creation of institutional foundations for a market-oriented monetary policy. And fourthly, privatization and the creation of well-functioning capital market, also in order to, what was very important, especially at the beginning of the transformation process, to establish an effective system of public control over the transfer of saving, both from our countries abroad and from abroad to our countries. I think that a fundamental advantage over other models I recognize of choosing the model of capitalist revolution, apart from its alterations and differences in the course of changes in particular spheres, the differences between V4 countries. So the principal advantage is that this is the only model, I'm deeply convinced, which creates a momentum which protects us, of course, maybe not 100%, against different attempts at looking for the so-called third way or for hybrid socio-economic systems, as in some Asian countries, based on quite different, comparing to Europe, values and axiological order. Apparently, it doesn't mean that there is no room, not only in our countries, for seeking new model solutions, as it takes place, for example, in a very important stream in contemporary economics, which is the so-called variety of capitalism approach. So maybe you know such names as Hall and Soskais. These are leading economists as for that very, very important stream in contemporary economics, variety of capitalism approach. Thank you very much. But once again, I apologize for the inconvenience connected with a technical defect of my computer. But I hope that for the time being, everything works okay.
Of course, no problem, Boguslav. It happens to all of us. It happens to all of us, so that's no worries about it. We appreciate it very much, your very structured intervention. Now, a view from Czechia. May I invite Svatya, please?
Of course. So, well, good afternoon to everyone. First, thank you, and I'm very proud that I can be here with you, and that's a great pleasure for me to be invited here. So, from my point of view, I would be careful to talk like the attitude of the Czechia, but from my point of view, the main challenge was what was already mentioned previously by my colleagues, was the privatization, which means a change of the ownership. because we change ownership not only of huge corporations, but all these small shops, restaurants, pubs, including small newsstands, everything. And there are many issues behind for both, of course, policymakers and of course also for businesses, because it doesn't represent only the change of the ownership, but also, which was very, very, very difficult technically, but it represents also new schemes of managerial and controlling structures. And mostly it was also very, very huge challenge for people, for managers who face two new tasks like marketing, PR, HR management. So these are disciplines which were not developed very well in central economics. And the second question, what we can learn for today? From my point of view, the important thing is the quality of institutional environment, because and impact of asymmetric information. Because, for example, in Czechia, the asymmetric information and low quality of institutional involvement led to monetary crisis, or it was one of the cause of monetary crisis in 1997 and 1998, with many, many consequences to the recent days. For example, I will not mention a decline of GDP and unemployment, because it's just a short-term effect, but the long-term effect is, for example, in the structure of banking sector. So, for example, in Czechia, 98% of banks are now controlled by foreign mother banks, which has huge consequences, and it also contributes, this fact also contributes to the debates if we should or we shouldn't adopt the euro and so on. So from my point of view, what we can learn for today is the importance of institutional environment.
Thank you very much, dear Svatja. And now I invite Martin from Bratislava. Please, Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you, and greetings and apologies from the current president of the Slovak Economic Association, Eduard Banmol, who unfortunately on a short notice was not able to join. Thank you very much for the question, which indeed is an important question. Well, what we have learned from the transformation, and experience before that is that the decades of central planning distorted societies and economies so dramatically that it has left us with lasting effects, which are still apparent. We still are living through them, and these are the differences between the East and the West, so to say, but also within Central Eastern Europe. And this doesn't, of course, only concern capital, technology, but also more broader concepts like social capital, governance, civil society, etc. And what we have also learned is that the expectations that many held early in transition of a speedy completion of transition were unrealistic. Transformations were bumpy, non-linear, some transformations reversed, and the initial conditions mattered a lot. We see that the position of different countries initially at the beginning of transformation really heavily affected transformation path thereafter. Now, from the policy perspective, related key lesson is that given the variation across countries in terms of initial conditions, in terms of what societies could accept and live with, the prescriptions with respect to policy advice and what policies have been implemented, they should have also differed. Yes, policies should have differed, not in their key objectives, but more in instruments and communication and fine-tuning with respect to the needs and preferences of different countries. Another lesson is that what we have neglected a bit, not entirely, but to some extent, not trivial extent, is institutional transformations. We placed a large emphasis on economic transformations, and rightly so, that was important. Political transformation, again, rightly so, very important. But given that societies have had certain capacity to bear the burden of transformations and reforms and changes, there were some difficult trade-offs. And unfortunately, most of the time, institutions, health system, education, broader institution, governance, they have lagged. They have lagged behind because maybe it was felt that that those concerns were not very immediate. Of course, first you need to get employed and make sure employment is there, make sure some production is back, and take care of the certain necessities, so to say. And institutions were considered of maybe not that as not that important. And of course, this doesn't concern all institutions, but some of them, they were neglected, including institutions of governance, and also some softer elements to this, softer measures like social norms and values, civil societies, openness to organizations, entrepreneurship, regulation, and with somewhere we did better job, but somewhere we simply did not do a very good job. And in some worst cases, also big institutions resulted in problems of running the state capture, and progress has stalled in some countries. So these are my initial comments on the lessons, which were overall a very positive experience, very enriching experience, and also enabling and empowering for people in Central Eastern Europe. We have benefited overall, but some of the lessons are that we neglected certain areas, which actually now it's becoming very apparent. And I come back to that later in further interventions. It's becoming apparent that those neglected areas are now giving us some hard time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Martin and dear colleagues. Yes, it's not easy to summarize the changes, what happened roughly 30 years ago in the region, but I think you rightly underlined the most important and most challenging elements of those historic changes. If we still remain a bit in the history, probably the next major historical step after changing political regime at the beginning of the 90s was that our countries joined the European Union in 2004. And my second question is related to this event. So after having joined the Union in 2004, markets are now open. As many of you already mentioned, there is a competitive open market where our entrepreneurs are acting. This competition is regulated, quite strictly regulated. Foreign trade is a community competence. Social systems are coordinated amongst the member states. Cohesion funds are co-financing largely the public investments. Common agricultural policy, all the countries are beneficiaries of that policy. And Slovakia has even introduced the euro. Just to mention a few achievements and a few facts about our membership and the benefits what the membership brought to the region. Dear colleagues, my next question would be, how do you see the long-term economic impact of the EU membership for our countries? What do you feel important to mention when we speak about the long-term economic impact of the membership? At this time, first I would like to ask Professor Fyodor to take the floor. So dear Boguslav, the floor is yours. Dear Boguslav, can you hear us? We cannot hear you again. I know that our colleagues in Budapest are trying to help, so it may work.
What is now with my voice?
It's not yes, yes.
But there are some breaks. I'm very sorry. I am very sorry. Who is now going to speak as first with the second question? Again, voice.
Can you hear me?
No.
I'm afraid we cannot hear you. At least I cannot hear you. I will ask our. Yes, I understand that now you are muted, dear Boguslav. I got a message from our technical host. Yes, I think can you hear us?
What about now?
Now it's fine. Now it's fine.
I'm sorry.
No, yes.
Okay.
So, if you would be ready to
yes,
start.
I'm ready. Gyula, it's okay now for a moment. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Floor is yours.
So the second question, having only a few minutes, I feel almost helpless to answer this question, but I will do my best nevertheless. So I would like to highlight two things. So firstly, entering the European Union, and prior to that, the adoption of the Treaty on Association. As for Poland, it happened already in December 1991. I have no knowledge about other four countries. So entering the Union, and as I said, already adoption of the Treaty on Association. So very early, at the beginning of 90s, imposed the necessity to fulfill both the economic, I mean fiscal and monetary convergence criteria, so the so-called Maastricht criteria, but also the political criteria. So pluralistic democratic system, rule of law, respect for minority rights, and so on. So the Copenhagen criteria. Thus, firstly, the EU membership implies the need of striving for both balanced economic growth and the balance between expenditures and revenues of the whole public sector, the so-called general government, in particular. Apparently, in the course of current coronavirus pandemic boosted economic crisis, one observes in almost all the EU member countries some derogations from those economic criteria connected, among other things, with the quantitative easing of monetary policy or growing share of non-budget expenses in order to finance various kinds of state financial assistance for both enterprises and employees, lowering this way actual level of central government deficit and public debt. I do expect or hope, however, that after combating the crisis, such a monetary and economic policy will be, as prior to the crisis, I mean current crisis, considered as something extraordinary and transitionary and not as a new normality. There are some views that the so-called new monetary theory will become ruling regime, monetary regime in the future, as you for sure know. Secondly, and I would like to put even more emphasis on that, I consider the EU membership of our countries as a very solid institutional guarantee for the observance of political convergence criteria I have mentioned earlier. In this, I find also important to remind that as a result mainly from the achievements of new institutional economics, a transformation from a centrally planned economy, or as I like to say, command and control economies, towards a market economy is mostly politically driven revolutionary institutional change. A change which consists in the transformation from economy and society, in which dominate rent-seeking and free rider types of behavior, towards an economy and society in which economic activities are mostly efficiency driven. Of course, it would be an utopia to expect that there is at all no rent seeking and free riding in real market economies. But the problem is the scope. From a purely economic point of view, this way understood transformation results, first of all, in a spectacular reduction of transaction costs and in turn growth of overall economic efficiency. Abstracting completely from political or ideological objections, the departure from the observance of above-mentioned political convergence criteria will sooner or later result in more rent-seeking and free rider activities, and subsequently in lowering overall economic efficiency of the economy. Additionally, it will negatively influence the whole system of informal institutions, which is also of fundamental significance for that efficiency. We may consider that also as the deepening institutional disequilibrium. I refer here to what, as far as I remember, Svato has said about the significance of institutions in the whole transformation process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Boguslav.
I hope that there was no break in connection, or
absolutely, we followed you. There was no problem at all.
Thank you.
Many thanks. Many thanks. Again, a very structured presentation in a nutshell. Very interesting. May I invite now Svatya, please?
Thank you. I will be much more shorter than my colleague. So I would like to point out two facts. So of course, there are many literature and many empirical studies on the positive impact of the European integration. But I would like to point out two facts. The first one is coordination, because I think that the economic impact of policy coordination is significant and huge, because it is not also surprising that policy actions of big countries affect the economic development and behavior of small open economies. And I think that the entrance of our country in the European Union was the only chance how to help with coordination of policies. Second thing is that, of course, we face too many symmetric shocks with asymmetric effects, where the coordinated policies are missing. For example, now COVID crisis and so on. Because from my point of view, the coordination could be much more helpful. And this is the first fact. The second fact, which I would like to mention, is integration of educational systems and developing of research networks and programs, which support innovations like Horizon Europe, Horizon 2020, and so on. And I would like to point out that these programs are really unique in the world. So just compare the situation with US or with the other countries where these programs don't exist and compare the results of such programs in Europe. So from my point of view, this second benefit of the European integration is the most important because it really has the long term. So I was short, but that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Svatja. It was really concentrated on two issues, and I liked very much. And now may I come to Martin, please?
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak on this very important topic. If you look back, I think we agree, and my four speakers already mentioned that and very rightly described the benefits of being member of the larger economic space. Overall, I evaluate our EU membership as a very positive experience. From the economic perspective, we have been exploring economies of scale, scope. Also, to some extent, we have been able to coordinate certain efforts on a European scale, but that's also a small problem that I'll come back to. It's important from the geopolitical perspective too, in the global competition for resources and talents. This is an important endeavor with a world with several poles. It's important that Europe is one of those, and so integration at the European level is vital for placing Europe on that global geopolitical map. And I absolutely agree with Svatja on academic cooperation, flow of ideas, knowledge, culture exchange. These are very, very important elements to it. And we way too often, I'm an economist, but I that's also a critique of our own discipline, so to say, profession, that we should pay even more attention to this kind of cultural exchange and building links across national borders, building social capital and trust across national borders. That's very, very important for Europe. Being back under my hat of an economist, I think all this have helped us to increase returns to investment in capital, but also human capital. Yes. And that, of course, if returns to investment in, say, human capital increase, because people now can invest in their, use their skills and talents in a larger market, they're able to pursue better careers, more according to their preferences. But that has benefits for them at the individual level, and then they are more likely to invest in their human capital and invest in their abilities, which is helpful for the society and the economy. But this is also another, free lunch. There are some challenges in this process. We need to do our homework as well. Of course, coordinating 27 members toward a common objective is not trivial, and the free rider problem, very broadly speaking, here is there, and pursuing a common public good in a group of 27 countries, common public European good, is not a trivial matter, and we have to learn some lessons here as well for the future. From the Central Eastern European perspective or Visegrad perspective, a specific point is that we have joined a larger entity. We have integrated into European value chains and etc., economies. But at least from the Slovak perspective, I could say, the prospect of becoming a European Union member state has been helpful in coordinating the society to work towards a common objective. But being a member of the European Union and having integrated into nearly all its institutions now has left a bit of vacuum for the society. What's the next big project? What is it that we should be working on together? What is that where do we want to see Slovakia in 10, 20 years? What is it that we should coordinate on? And that is a challenge to reinvent ourselves a little bit and understand what is that common good that as a nation, as a Visegrad group, we should be working on for the future. And last point, very briefly, being a member of a large group, of course, is helpful in many ways, but it also means there is also some internal competition. Yes, that we and from the V4 perspective, as we are relatively recent to the club, not so recent anymore, but let's say there are partners which have been members since longer. We need to play a level game with all the partners. We need to also be well equipped for that level game, and that means doing our homework back home, good governance, and good training of experts, of bureaucrats, upgrading institutions, improving institutions, so that and building up expertise in ministries, in all kinds of levels of governance, so that we are well equipped to play a level game and be contribute to the European project best as we can, but also ourselves reap the benefits, explore and the benefits of membership to the largest possible extent. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Martin. You have covered quite a lot, and even looking into the future, much interesting. And now I invite Gyula. Gyula, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Well, all of our countries' wish was to join, more precisely as we in Hungary like to say, rejoin Europe. And now we are indeed part of Europe, and from 2004 of the EU. We are very much embedded in the EU economy. In case of Hungary, roughly 80% of our foreign trade goes to the EU countries, with Germany being the flagship partner. We are all beneficiaries of the EU cohesion and the new next generation funds. And these funds, no doubt, have been helping, and as long as they are, would help us or help our countries or help the Visegrad countries to catch up to the core EU countries. Well, and it will be coupled by the FDIs and the know-hows from the EU. But thanks to these and thanks to the commitments of the government of our countries, we have been reaching a remarkable growth premium over the EU. Certainly, our future success is very much dependent on the performance of the whole EU. It is therefore our key interest to be part of a competitive EU that increases its share in the global GDP. As far as I see, however, the EU seems to lose momentum that, well, again, in my eyes, can be attributed to the tensions between East and West and North and South. Sometimes I feel that we, I mean Hungary, that we are handled as unexperienced small kids seeking for education. Probably the same could happen to the southern countries, but this is beyond me. One indeed should try to understand that economy is not just about efficiency and competitiveness leading to profit, regardless of the social cultural context. Economy cannot be seen separated from culture, history, religion, and so on and so forth. We, the Visegrad countries, have common geopolitical, historical, and cultural roots. And based on those roots, we do have common regional values, just like the other regions, the Benelux Union, the Nordic region, or even the Baltic region do have. Well, I think that these values, combined with the core European values, could help Europe and the European economy to be more successful. And you know, as our future is really much linked to the future of Europe, I guess that the long-term impact could be positive if Europe can also listen to us and use our values. Wow, thank you. So this is from my side.
Thank you very much, Gyula. We got a quite wide range of opinions that I enjoyed very much, from a very structured one to a focused one, and to some issues touching the future and the interests and values of the region. Getting to the next question, many of you already mentioned the single market and how much the economy of the V4 countries are embedded into the EU as Gyula. The export ratio of the EU member states are very, very high, sometimes around 80%, as just in the case of Hungary, but very similar to in the other countries. Now, about the single market, while the four freedoms constitute the pillars of the European single market, there are still some barriers, and there are still some social considerations giving grounds for somewhat different interpretations of the single market. How do you see those trends? Opening markets on the one hand and restricting certain services on the other hand? Is the race to the bottom a real issue? And what are in general the comparative advantages, what is the comparative strengths of the companies of the V4 countries? May I start this round with Svatopluk, please? So Svatya, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned opening markets versus restricting services, which is, according to my attitude, also a philosophical question. But you mentioned four freedoms of the European market. I think that there is a general agreement about positive effects of single market on firm export value, total sales, value added, profitability, and so on. So I don't want to just repeat what we can read in papers, but I think that when we start to talk about the single market, so we start to talk about the freedoms, and it means that I think that labor mobility is a crucial issue today. Well, I don't want to discuss controversial issues like migration policy and so on, but I would like to mention that effects of labor market policies are not independent, they are interdependent, especially through reallocation of resources or structure of exporters and so on. And many governments mentioned that the Europe needs a labor market reform because the cost of labor is significantly increased by social security system, and it's a very important issue in a very close future because we face two huge changes after the COVID, and we expect transformation of selected sectors. And I think that because of these interdependencies, the coordination of labor policies is very important. And also when we talk about the reforms of these sectors, so we should talk about concrete things, because many governments state that it is necessary, but I didn't see that any government really define what does it mean, a reform of the labor market, a reform of taxation system, reform of pension system. Well, the second issue is, and I would like to focus more on V4 countries, is that there is one trademark of Visegrad Four, and it is automotive industry. And it is also connected with a single market and also with new technologies and automatization. And from my point of view, we must focus on new technologies, digital transformation, and technology-oriented grants, innovation programs, which I already mentioned. And I think that in this area, single market is very, very, very important tool. And third, I would like to mention that there are new debates on energy policy. And I think that internal energy market and our dependency on energy sources is a very, very, very important question. And of course, we should focus on energy transmission networks, on access to gas storage facilities, and many, many other issues, which are very important issues behind the single market. So from my point of view, yes, of course. So we must finish all freedoms of single market. There is no other way.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear Svatja. Yes, always appreciated if you come to the details of our region. Now, may I come to Martin, please? How you see it from Bratislava?
Thank you very much. The question here, or my perspective here, will be first a bit broader, and then I'll narrow it down to the V4 perspective. The single market provides a few key freedoms, among them freedom of mobility, mobility of labor, and that's something that we have also studied extensively, and we have shown how much it contributes to the European project in several aspects. And these are not only sort of hard economic factors, but these are also some softer impacts, like impacts on cultural exchange and mobility of technology, ideas, etc. But we have also detected in the data several obstacles to mobility, barriers to mobility, and several questions or issues, challenges, which we need to address. Among barriers to mobility, certainly some of the factors, the usual suspect factors, play a role, like language barriers, institutions, different legal systems in different countries, different jurisdictions, and different regulation. Those belong to those barriers. But what we also see is that the impact on the sending countries is a challenge. Yes? So there are barriers to mobility, those that I mentioned, but also there are more subtle ones which we usually overlook, but they are actually critical for some segments of the mobile labor force, including when you work in more than one EU member states. It's a bureaucratic nightmare. And for example, if you are tax resident in one country and you have a small contract in another country too, this is another hassle for the worker, but also for the employer. And potentially, just to give you an example, potentially an employer who employs 20 experts from 20 different countries on a small expert project has to understand and know the accounting systems and the contributions to Social Security in all those 20 countries, which is even for larger employers, it's a very often big problem. But overall, we're doing relatively well there, and we see that the impacts are positive for the receiving countries. The impacts are, however, much more complex, let's put it this way, or challenging for the sending countries, who are losing some of their most skilled and most talented workers, which of course does help. And this is one of the contributions of the V4 countries towards the European project, that this kind of mobile labor force helps Europe and countries, members, including the V4 members, to cope with the economic shocks. And this is a way of adjustment, and we have shown that this, you can see this also in the data, that actually this mobile labor force is helping Europe to deal with economic crises and asymmetric economic shocks. But we have not yet developed sort of the full model of European migration, circular migration, which would be as helpful from the macro perspective, helping receiving countries to gain access to skilled, qualified labor force, but would equally help the sending countries to benefit from brain gain, to benefit from circulation of labor, people going abroad, but then also coming back and bringing back the skills and other resources that have accumulated during their migration experience. And one last, but maybe two more points briefly. There is a lot of challenge in this whole process. There are some challenges in this process related to precarity of some of the mobile labor force, where being foreigners in the receiving countries, those people may not be fully integrated in a social welfare system, participating in the labor market, in wage bargaining, and then this leads to deterioration of their social protection. Local actors are maybe not so keen on integrating foreigners. The local social partners maybe don't cover exactly well this new entrance in the market, and then we have a challenge of precarious working conditions and working arrangements for some of these mobile workers. And the last question that was asked in this round about comparative strengths of the V4 countries. For the long time, it was the low labor costs, and that was sort of low-hanging fruit, and this also related to some people actually leaving countries, and the single market was actually helping to adjust these countries to the higher economic standards. But this is not sufficient anymore. If you talk about comparative, and I don't want to jump too much into the future, but just a little bit, if you talk about comparative advantage, then we need to actively build it. And this can be skills, infrastructure, building attractive innovation hubs, institutions, reaping benefit of single market, of mobility, of talents, etc., trying to concentrate them in some innovation hubs in our countries. But that's comparative advantage. I don't see as something that's given. It's something that we have to actively work on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Martin. I think you addressed some very relevant questions. I liked it very much. Gyula, may I invite you now?
Thank you, Dan. Well, your question touched indeed a bit strange situation. On the one hand, the 4 freedoms have been introduced, and the less developed EU countries, the newcomers, have been the beneficiaries of the cohesion fund. On the other hand, however, these countries have to face some restrictions from time to time. Let's remind us the quotas on the labor market following our EU accession, crowding off the Hungarian construction teams from Germany, or even introduction of tough regulations on truck drivers, well, just very recently. So on the one hand, the core members of the EU aim at supporting the improvement of the competitiveness and the growth potential of the newcomers. On the other hand, they seem to somehow safeguard their positions in this or that way. For years, the Western and Northern developed countries have been making nice profits on the less developed countries, especially within the Eurozone. Just an example, that the euro for Greece were too expensive, or too strong. The euro for Germany was too small, so the consequences are automatic. So this could have made the core countries if I may say, a bit cozy. So they have paid then less attention to their own competitiveness vis-a-vis their real peers, I mean, US, Asia. As the competitiveness of the less developed part of the EU improved, this advantage, this free lunch started to shrink. Well, just let me take a very trivial example. Now we are in the circle of the V4 countries. So look at the Skoda, which is now a real competitor to Volkswagen. So when the advantage over the less developed countries started to shrink, then as far as I see, the core countries, by introducing different measures or barriers, started to compete their fellow EU members rather than focusing on their global competitors. So I think the race to the bottom is indeed there as a tool for the emerging part of the EU or the converging part of the EU to compensate themselves for the effects of the unequal level of liberalization of the four freedoms. I think, however, that this race to the bottom will be turned to the race to the top. I mean, the race to the quality, because the technology is improving from time to time very quickly, and in our countries, more and more new technologies arrive in the form of different FDIs. So our workers, our people will be more and more skills. So the race to the bottom will lose its importance, I think, in the rather close future, and will be replaced by the race to the top. And certainly the ideal situation would be the EU consisting of roughly equally strong members in economic terms, and with the sources allocated in the most efficient way, and improving the global market share of EU. And I think that we have the chance to reach that status. So I indeed hope that sooner or later these restrictions, these barriers will be abandoned, and all four freedoms have reached the very same level of liberalization. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Gyula. You shared with us some interesting thoughts about competitiveness, how certain parts of the union are contributing to other parts of the union's competitiveness. It was quite interesting to listen. And may I invite now dear Boguslav to share with us your views. Dear Boguslav, we cannot hear you. I don't know, are you muted? And now
now it's better, or
now it's excellent. Floor is yours.
Thank you. So from the political perspective, this is a very delicate or question, at least the first part of it. Luckily, all the colleagues who spoke prior to me have highlighted most important elements of the answer to that question. So I will be not so specific. I will confine myself to rather more general consideration. First of all, I would like to start with the statement that what matters our countries as well as the remaining countries of the European Union, such a state of the conflict of national interest is something pretty common, not only for the Union, for all the regional integration grouping. So the history of EU is the history of national conflicts, but luckily, sooner or later, we, as the member, even prior to our membership in the European Union, we were able to solve such problems, and I hope that so it will be in the future. And the conflicts between national interest within regional within European Union, and not only, became even much sharper and more visible during the last crisis time. Nowadays, within the time of the COVID-19 pandemic boosted economic crisis, I think that most important here is reacting to such conflicts is to avoid what I describe as spontaneous actions. For example, first of all, introducing restrictions in the form on different non-tariff trade barriers. First of all, in the market of some services. By the way, this is the issue which is within which also the World Trade Organization was coping for many decades already, 2 decades at least, because the opening of or liberalization of markets of services is much more difficult than in the case of, let's say, standard commodities. So, but I am very much convinced that we should avoid introducing some local or national domestic restrictions in order to maximize our short-term benefits. Which means of a given country. Why not? You may ask the question. Why should be rather moderate in this issue? Because such a policy will ever, sooner or later, evoke austerity or retaliatory measures by countries being subject to such restrictions. Hence, what we really should look for is ever, as it has been also the case in the history of European Union, the compromise and cooperation based on the balance between short and long-term benefits and costs, and avoiding a struggle against each other. And coming to the second part of the question concerning our countries. So this is more what I want to say is more intuitions and knowledge, because I'm not an expert in the performance of European single market or generally in the economic international relations. So first of all, the comparative, I feel that the potential comparative strengths of the V4 companies may be here connected not only in the case of the market of services, with the existence of a mass number of small, micro and family companies. As for Poland, we have some 2.5 million of such small companies, and subsequently, with their better knowledge of needs and preferences of local communities, higher vis-a-vis big companies, higher flexibility and things like that. I would like to give you one example which I observed for the last 2-3 years, connected with the renewable energy. So a good example here is a burst of small companies, over 100,000 already in Poland, dealing with photovoltaic installation. So in that sector, and they are pretty successful despite the sharp competition from big, and having also long-term experience enterprises, including also big international companies or their subsidiaries acting in the sector of renewable energy in Poland. So this time I was much more brief than in the case of the first two questions. I saved some time, but we have still, as far as I remember, 2 questions to be discussed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear. We have time, so I appreciated very much your to-the-point presentation. But as I said, we are flexible. Yes, we still have 2 questions, but probably the last one will be a shorter one. But so we have discussed a bit about the past, but many of you touched upon issues about the future. How we redefine us, what will be the values in 20 years. Now, the conference on the future of Europe just started last week. Now there's a homepage where all the citizens can present their ideas, and real conferences will start soon. And there will be many fora for our citizens, entrepreneurs, to say, researchers, to say what they think about the future of Europe. In this exercise, I have found a sentence where what I think it's interesting, and I would be happy if you could help me decode, particularly from a V4 perspective. So the Conference on Europe intends to address the economy that works for people. It's a nice slogan. What would you think? What would it mean for our countries? An economy that works for people. And maybe now I would start with Martin, please.
Thank you, dear Gabor. So yes, this is a good sentence which should not only be a kind of slogan, but of course it's important to give it real impact, real flesh, and so that it really and real interpretations what it means in the practice. And what we've seen recently, well, over some years already, the financial economic crisis, the current pandemic, have exposed a number of weaknesses of the European economic and social underpinnings, and we are just starting to address those. We see failures in governance, we see institutional deficiencies, regulatory problems, risk management, managing risks. That's during the pandemic that has become so obvious how limited capacity and courage we have in addressing and managing risks. We see corruption. They all pose questions to functioning European societies. And what has become apparent also from the perspective of the V4 countries, Central Eastern Europe, is that the kind of growth model that we have been living on since many years and has reached its limits. In the V4 countries, what we see is that we have capital inflows, technological transfer, that all has helped tremendously. But we see that there are some limits to it, and we see that we need to reinvent the European growth model and the European social model for a sound and sustainable economy, so that indeed it works for people, and that it must be a model which is enabling, empowering people in their economic lives, but also supporting and offer protection as if and as needed to European citizens. And Central Eastern Europe has certainly contributed greatly to the European growth model in the past. It offered a place for investment. It offered contributed skilled labor, which also helped Europe to adjust. It contributed rich assets in terms of expertise and cultural exchange, etc. And also, particularly, V4 countries have contributed, helping us understand transformations of a massive scale. We have gone through transformations, And that is something where we should think very hard how Central Eastern Europe can help us understand the transformation that is also needed in the European Union. And that's the transformation to a growth model which is inclusive, which is socially responsible and is sustainable also from the perspective of the environment. And we have to think about the model, and that's somewhere where Central Eastern Europe has also not done the job, but it has experience from the past that we have done that we have done significant transformation, and we can learn from that and the mistakes we have made, which we already discussed earlier today. So an upgrade is needed in Europe, and this is what Central Eastern Europe, these 4 countries, can contribute to. And our homework here is to continue reforms to improve the business climate, to create favorable conditions for advanced technological investment, for innovation, more tilted towards services and upgrading the infrastructure, so that we can help Europe and offer our expertise in transformations, so that we can help Europe to transform, to reinvent itself. And this has to be a multilateral project where, with respect among partners, with listening among partners, and dialogue which is enriching to all of us. And well, this maybe doesn't answer the question how precisely Europe should work for the citizen, but these are the key elements to that process, I think, and these are the contributions from Central Eastern Europe that can help us to reach that objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. That's very much to the point. Many thanks. It was very nice to listen to this, to your well thought views. May I continue with Gyula, please? Dear Gyula, floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, the timing of this conference is really funny. So there are very important issues in the pipeline now. I mean, the coming German-French elections, the closing of Brexit, the building up or understanding the relation to the new US administration. So that could fine-tune or even maybe some will reshape the visions of the EU. But anyway, so insofar as the concept of the economy that works for the people is concerned, for me, it means that the EU, or we, have to move away from the principle of money makes the world go around, if we remember the Cabaret movie. So we have to move away from that, and the GDP has to be replaced by somewhere in these that incorporates also the issues of sustainability, the circular economy, the poverty, the inequality, the health, the general well-being of people. Several publications have been prepared and issued on this matter. Professor Stieglitz, let me refer to Professor Stieglitz's happiness in this, and then there were some others. So this would certainly request a renewed approach to the principles of distribution of funds. Much more focus should be devoted to the SME sector, as they are far more the biggest employers in our region. And also more focus should be devoted to the institutions that work for the circular economy. More focus should be given to the fight against the poverty. We should try to reduce the numbers of the working poor, because there are people who are employed, still they can be considered poor. So that is quite an amount of job. The idea itself is really great, and I can just second Martin that our contribution, I mean the Visegrad countries' contribution, could be to to provide ideas and provide expertise for these procedures, or even provide some practices. From Hungary, let me just mention that the Hungarian Central Bank has been issued some more than 300 proposals on improving the competitiveness and moving a little bit toward this type of economy that serves the people. So maybe some of those proposals, those ideas, could be an added value to the common EU level efforts. But the number one task should be then to create the necessary funding to finance this turnover. And when these funds are at disposal, that's the real changes start. And this is the point where the story starts to be a bit challenging in Europe, where the growth is now rather moderate compared to the competitors, and the share of the social expenditures is far more the highest in the world. So I think that both from economic point of view and both from intellectual point of view, we have a lot to do to reach this type of economy, which again I think is a very good direction. So thank you.
Thank you, dear Gyula. Indeed, we are economists, but we can go beyond the strictly spoken economic considerations. So many thanks. May I now invite dear Boguslav?
Thank you, Ivan. The whole time I'm fighting with the technology, losing and retrieving my voice connection. What about hearing me now? Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Once again, I succeeded to retrieve the connection. So the conference you mentioned in your question number 4 is about the conference, which is really going to be something very special because it's addressed not I would say to countries or their governments, but first of all directly to the people of European Union. Let me only remind that the European Union has started a special 24 languages platform for all the Europeans to enable them to communicate directly in their languages. So it will be for the first time in the history to have something like that. And also the leaders of the union have invited Ursula von Leyen or the president of the parliament have directly invited the EU citizens. So as I said, the question, what would you consider, this is your Ivan's question, what would you consider as added value of your countries to such an economic concept, is aimed, as I said, not at countries or at their governments, but directly at citizens of our 4 countries. And frankly speaking, I have no knowledge on potential questions which could be raised by Polish, Czech, Hungarian, or Slovaks or citizens. As for myself, to be more specific, I will recommend 3 fundamental topics to be discussed and addressed within that conference. So the first is the state and the future of participatory democracy in Europe, especially in the context of the threats connected with the rise of populism, including also the discussion about the variety of its sources, cultural, economic, technological, demographical. And the second thing I would like to suggest is the strategy of fair energy transformation in Europe, above all, but not exclusively, in the context of global climate policy. And the third issue, I would refer now to what Gyula already has discussed, the significance of cultural heritage of Central Eastern European countries for pan-European axiological order. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just taking like what you said. Many thanks. And for the same issue about the future, maybe Svatya, you have also some ideas to share.
Okay, thank you very much. So I mean that, or I think that the economy that works for people is a very nice statement, a very nice acknowledgement. Of course, it's connected with the process of reducing poverty and inequality, but I think that this process is closely related to the small and medium-sized enterprises. And from my point of view, we don't need many regulations or additional regulations. And also, when I talk in my previous messages, when I talk about the coordination and policy coordination, so I just mean that we need to coordinate policy actions, not to establish new regulations. And why I would like to mention it here, because from my point of view, the issue which became more and more important these days is economic policy uncertainty, which has huge effects on small and medium companies, because it reduces investment, innovations, development, and so on and so on. And my opinion, maybe it's too liberal, but I would like to give a message to policymakers, especially fiscal policymakers, to improve their work with expectations of economic agents. And that's the difference between monetary and fiscal policy, because monetary policymakers, they know the impact of expectations and work with that very well. But many policy actions on the fiscal side distort expectations, increase uncertainty, reduce investment activities, economic development, and so on, which is the main background of the economy that works for people. So my message here at this point is reduction of policy uncertainty related to the policy actions which could be coordinated and shouldn't distort the expectations of economic action. This is, I think, what policymakers could do for the people, for small and medium-sized firms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again. A particular view merits much attention. Colleagues, getting towards the end of the list of my questions, my last question is very simple. I see that our economics are very much linked, but there are still some unexploited opportunities. And my question is that if you were asked to give 3 pieces of advice to your governments on how to strengthen the cooperation and the synergies amongst the Visegrad Four countries, what would be your 3 pieces of advice on this subject? Gyula, may I ask you first to share with us your...
Sure, thanks. Well, if you look at the Visegrad group, we will see that by now the group has become a very strong entity within the EU, both in terms of economics and voting rights. Well, according to some estimations, right now the contribution of the Visegrad group or the share of the Visegrad group in the EU GDP reaches the 6%, and it is estimated to go up to 10% by the end of this MFF. It has now more than 10% share in the gross foreign trade of the EU 27, sorry, and 6% share in the FDI absorption. The group has now more than if I'm correct, more than 12% of the votes within the Council of the European Union. The members of the group by now have stable political, social, economical regimes. They have a very clear vision on their future role. In my first intervention, I have listed some concrete remarkable results of the cooperation of the four countries. And this successful cooperation is based just on a letter of intent, just one pager, and on the ambitions of the leaders of the four countries. As I have mentioned earlier, looking at the results the group has reached so far, it seems that there is more potential for cooperation to safeguard or even enforce the common interest. We have some other very good examples in Europe. There are very strong regional alliances like the Benelux or the Nordic cooperation. So both of them are strong, well organized, and could efficiently represent the interests of their members. Having said this, a further step forward within the Visegrad group could be somehow formalize the cooperation, say working on the basis of a 4 years common strategy, or to nominate Visegrad Four minister in each and every government, or to add this Visegrad Four matter or mandate to the portfolio of one of the ministers. It would be useful to increase the visibility of the cooperation by more communication, or even by a common logo, or which would require some paperwork to set up a Visegrad Four secretariat with some dedicated budget. If you look at the map, the transportation map of Europe, we will see that there are very good traffic lines or communication lines between east and west. But the north and south direction is not very well improved. So another option would be to establish a fast train connection among the four capitals, so as to improve the accessibility of each there, and then maybe more southern countries could join this line. And finally, I could suggest establishment of a Visegrad Four development bank to refinance the common projects. So it was a little bit more than 3 probably, but so these were my ideas. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm sure that if you have more than 3, that's just enriching the debate. So many thanks. May I invite now Boguslav. Dear Boguslav, what would you advise to the government to strengthen the cooperation? We cannot hear you right now. Still, we have a problem. Maybe. And now maybe better.
Now it's better.
Yes, now we can hear you.
So as I said, I'm struggling the whole time against some technical problems. Okay, so, the last question is economic policy related question. As Gyula, I would like, I do my best to be very specific in answering this question. So my first recommendation is connected with some lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic. So what is that we should, from that pandemic, is that we should look more and more for opportunities to shorten the international supply chains. So my recommendation is to launch coordinated. I know it's easy to say, but it's before activities to then a vertical labor division just in the scale of our countries in some industries. I think that the biggest potential is for sure in the automotive industry, because we are altogether the most important region in terms of the percentage in car and trucks production. This share is exceeding now 20% for the whole European Union of our 4 countries. So another example could be because we are also strong in those sectors is home electronics and home appliances. So I find this important because it could result not only in more secure and less costly supply chains, but also contribute to the growth of competence of enterprises acting in our industries. I am fully aware that it's not easy to implement such recommendation, for example, because that there are many foreign companies, first of all German ones, but not Japanese, and from other countries being main manufacturers in those industries. The second recommendation is to increase the cooperation between our countries, which is much easier to do, as I think, in higher education and research and development. And I refer here to suggestion of many of discussants today. First of all, in such areas as energy, and especially renewable energy, of health and tourism. And the third recommendation, and I refer here to what Gyula said just a while ago, to develop or strengthen regional financial markets and institutions. I think here not only of the V4 regional bank, but also about having one strong stock exchange. I wouldn't like to say that it should be Warsaw Stock Exchange, but why not? Because as far as I know, this is for the time being the biggest stock exchange in our region, but still pretty small comparing to the leading stock exchanges in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Boguslav. I'm also happy to go to Warsaw for stock exchange or for any other reason. Thank you very much. And now maybe I would ask Svatopluk. Dear Svatya, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So first of all, it's very easy to advise government because we are not members of the government. So all specific and all details we mentioned already here is very easy to mention for us, but in reality, to make these all steps could be very, very, very difficult. But of course, so we must improve cooperation, but not only economic cooperation. This is my first message, because V4 countries create the largest economy in the EU. It means that not only economic cooperation is needed, but also political cooperation. Because if we coordinate our steps, then we can defend our positions against the rest of the EU and also other CEE countries. Especially in a case of discussion about the Europe of many speeds or energy policy, for example. It's very, very, very important. Second message is related to coordination of policy steps and policy actions, especially in case of pension and tax system reforms, because the countries or the government do not incorporate international effects of such reforms. And I think that it should be incorporated, especially between our countries, because we have similar problems. And the third message is also about the shocks which we can expect now and which are connected with rising of government debts, and which are also rising because government debts and the amount of assets like bonds in a country increase risk premium, which has significant effect on investments and so on, and capital flows. And all these issues I think are very important for debate about the euro adoption. So my last point is, and message is, to open the discussion about the euro adoption. I'm not sure if the result will be positive or negative, and I don't want to say that the euro is good or bad tool for our countries, but I think we should start, or we should open the discussion about it. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Svata. We have a question about the Eurozone anyhow from our audience, so we'll come back to it right after I'm finishing this circle. But we still have Martin, and I'm curious what he would advise to the government.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I would advise the governments. I can hear myself now. I get a bit of too much echo. Thank you. Thank you. I would advise the governments to read actually the memorandum that the four associations have signed and read the memorandum that they themselves, the governments, have signed in 1991, because that gives a good deal of inspiration. What we write in our memorandum of cooperation that we signed in 2018 is that the Visegrad Group reflects the efforts of countries to work together in a number of fields of common interest and European integration, and share cultural, intellectual values which they wish to preserve and strengthen further. And in order to preserve and promote cultural cohesion, the participating countries enhance the imparting humanistic and democratic values, and all the activities are aimed at strengthening stability in the region, cooperation, and integration, fostering integration into international structures. So this is important, and this is what the governments should embrace, and then go back to the 1991 declaration and review it. And there, many of the points, the concrete points, have been to a large extent achieved. Integration to the European Union and many things. But I would like to second what also Gyula said earlier, that and I'm again citing from that declaration, that we should focus on the development of the infrastructure in communications, and we have done good deal of work in the east-west direction, but the north-south direction, integrating the V4 countries, building links, infrastructural linkages, that is something that's my point number one. Point number two is increasing cooperation in the field of ecology, and looking at how we can work to that effect together. And last point taken from the declaration is that we should create favorable conditions for free flow of information, press, and cultural values. And so this would be my 2 cents on this. Go back to the declaration, review them, and see where we have done good job. And I congratulate the governments on doing great job on many aspects. But then also look at those where we are still possibly, there is still room for much improvement, and these were the 3 that I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Martin. I particularly like that you also mentioned the north-south connections, the links, which are still very much missing. Colleagues, we have arrived to the end of our panel discussion, but we have got some questions from our audience. I have shared the questions with you. I will highlight some of the elements of these questions, and I will invite you to share with us and with our respected audience your views. The first question is related very much to the euro, not too much surprise. Svatja just mentioned that one of his advice is to discuss what it would mean for the countries who have not yet introduced the euro. So we have a question whether how it would change the economies of the Visegrad countries if all were introducing the euro, whether it causes a crack between the V4 countries, as one of them is using the euro and the others are not. How would and also what are the experience in Slovakia? In that context, there is also questions: what do you think about the multi-state Europe? So one member state, one state out of the four already introduced the euros, others not yet. I suppose the question is relating to that. So that's the same bunch of questions. Who would start? Who would say some reflections about the euro and the using it in the V4 countries? Well, there is a concrete question amongst these questions, the Slovakian experience. So I cannot resist the temptation to ask Martin to say a few words about this concept.
Thank you very much, Gabor, and thanks very much to the audience for the question. There are presidents in this room who know much better about monetary policy than I do, but the experience, as far as I can evaluate the experience of Slovakia, has been very positive one, and I sincerely hope that it's not creating any fissure, any with respect to the other Visegrad countries. I think there is that's just one aspect of the economic collaboration, and I think that should not create any fissure. But the experience, if you ask about what is the experience of Slovakia, generally very positive. It's a small open economy. It's helping us to preserve stability in terms of a monetary policy, and it also, I mean, of course, there are costs and benefits to independent monetary policy, as we all know very well. But for a small open economy so tightly connected to the trading partners in Europe, this is decreasing the risk, is making the life more predictable for investors, and whether this is an optimal currency area, well, so far it has worked reasonably well, and the integration of Slovakia in value chains and economic relations with the economic core of Europe seems to be sufficient to make euro a viable arrangement for Slovakia, and so far I see many benefits to that at a macroeconomic level, but also at a very practical level for people who now have a stable currency with which they can pay in a large number of countries, and that's beneficial. But I stop here, and I would be very keen on hearing from experts on monetary policy in this, and experiences, how the views from other countries, other Visegrad countries on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I felt somehow, Gyula, that you are invited to share your views, please.
Thanks. So I would start with the statement that by signing the treaty, we committed ourselves to join the Eurozone at some stage. And even if we realized that especially in the light of the like two crises, I mean the 2008 crisis and the pandemic crisis, that certainly in some cases the euro is not as good as it was supposed to be. So the independent monetary policy could be a very good asset to manage the crisis, the consequences of the crises, and I guess that our monetary policy really helped to survive the crisis. But and again, I think I fully agree with Svata that it would be worth having a comprehensive chat on the adoption of the euro, even together with EU experts, and having even Slovakia on board, as they have good experiences. But what we think and what our position is that if and when we join the eurozone, then we would like to be an added value to the common currency rather than a drag on it. And so one of the takeaways from the crisis was that that just the Maastricht criteria or the fulfillment of the Maastricht criteria is not enough to safely join the eurozone. So we have set up some more conditions for ourselves. I mean, per capita GDP should reach a certain level of the average of the core countries. The financial deepness of the financial institutions should be much more, or much deeper than it is now. In terms of the competitiveness, we should make a huge step ahead. So we do have some more conditions so as to really benefit from the euro, and to consider it worth giving up the independent monetary policy. So in principle, at this stage, we don't really have any objection against joining the eurozone, but we would like to prepare ourselves. I know that there were success stories, so Slovakia could be considered a success story, the Baltic countries could be considered success stories, but all of them had to pay the price for that. So prior to adopting the euro, they really had to impose some austerity measures, and finally some of the Baltic countries was almost emptied, and after that certainly they could recover. But in Hungary we had so many austerity measures, or austerity cycles, so it wouldn't be a favorable or popular way for us. So we would like just to grow and improve our system step by step, and at some stage we could reach the level when it wouldn't mean any risk for us to join the eurozone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear Gyula. I don't know whether.
Sorry. So I don't think that this euro non-euro issue could cause any crack among ourselves. So, thanks.
Yes, I also think so, actually. Dear Boguslav or Svatya, you can also add if you like.
But first of all, again, I'm starting with checking what about my voice. Can you hear me? Okay. So I would like to start with a very general statement that there is never the best time for joining the euro. So we may only say about better and worse times for entering the euro. As for Poland, and I think also for the remaining V4 countries, except Slovakia, because they have entered the eurozone, The best time was the year 2005, 2006, so shortly before the crisis, 2008 and 2009. But what is very important is to avoid ideological discussion vis-à-vis entering the Eurozone. So we should, as economists, focus not on artificial questions of sovereignty. Purposefully, I have said artificial, because they are sometimes exaggerated by politicians. So we should have ever a solid calculus of costs and benefits. And we have should departments at the level of now our national banks to conduct such a calculus. As for Poland, we liquidated such department a few years ago. We don't have systematic studies on euro, on costs and the benefits of entering or not entering the Eurozone in Poland. So the discussion about euro in Poland has been dominated by purely political arguments, or in ideological arguments. And so, having said that, I would like to say that just now is the best time to because this is not the best time for sure, the time of crisis. But we should ever remember that not having overall detailed knowledge based on research, on solid analysis about pros and cons, about costs and benefits, will be never able to join the in a reasonable way to join the euro. So I would like to appeal to politicians, not only in Poland, not to give up systematic research studies on that, and to replace them with some politics and ideology. Thank you.
Thank you, Boguslav. Svatja, you would like to add something?
Yeah, I would like to conclude with one thing which I also presented to the students, and this is the fact that the euro is just a tool, just an instrument, and it's on a side of policymakers if and whether they want to use it and how. Of course, it has pros, it has cons, of course, but maybe I think that from in previous empirical studies, the costs of the euro are maybe overestimated. Of course, there are also many studies that benefits of the euro are overestimated, and I think that we shouldn't target the euro as our objective. Yes, so we will adopt euro as our objective, but we should think about the single currency, about the tool. Yeah, and I think this is the different attitude, and could bring us the prosperity and development and so on. So that's just short summarization.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate very much. Dear colleagues, we have run out of our time, although we have some other questions. Do you have answer for one more question, or you have other engagement? One more question, maybe. Okay. I see here a question about what the business could do to get for the V4 countries closer, or even build a new brand. We discussed what we would advise to the government, but actually it's not only the government, but business also can do probably much to strengthen the cooperation and the synergies between the V4. So the question is, what do you think? What business can do for V4? Svatja, please.
So I think that the cooperation between the businesses in V4 countries must be bottom-up type, because I think we don't need a new brand, or businesses don't need a new brand. Of course, brands are based on regions and so on, but it must have make a sense. I think that it must be bottom up, and if it's reasonable, so well, they should cooperate. From my point of view, coordination and defending attitudes and interest of V4 countries is mostly at the side of the government and policymakers. So I think it is not reasonable now to advise businesses what they should do and how they should prepare a new brand and so on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's a very solid answer. Anyone else? Gyula, please.
Thanks. I fully agree with Svata. So the business is pragmatic. So if they find a place where they could make reasonable profit and they could enjoy themselves, they go there. So the Visegrad Four is rather political than an economical alliance or economic alliance. Absolutely understand. Absolutely agree that we shouldn't advise the business where to go and what to do. There are companies which have presence in each other's countries. So there are Hungarian companies in Slovakia, in other countries, even in the region. There are Czech countries, the Czech companies which are serving Hungarian customers and clients. So I think that if the investment climate, or we create a good climate for investments, then also investors from or FDI from the Visegrad countries could come, and vice versa. So our companies could go if they find some good opportunity in one of the Visegrad countries. But again, so I wouldn't advise any corporate just to focus on the Visegrad region or create a new brand.
Okay, thank you, Gyula. Anything to add? Boguslav, we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. You are muted. I think now you are unmuted. Now we are muted. Okay, maybe while you find a way to get back your voice, I would give the floor to Martin, who also raised his hand. Martin, please.
Thank you, Gabor. Thank you. Just very briefly, I entirely agree with Gyula and Svata that we are not in the position to tell business what to do. However, as the question's been asked, maybe one thing to consider is making sure that business's voice is heard when these questions are raised and discussed at the political level, at the level of governments, that their needs, for example, concerning regional development and cross-border development, cross-border cooperation, and this links to the infrastructure. For example, just an example, yes, if the eastern regions of Slovakia, Hungary, and Poland have no good roads, have no good infrastructure, well, we can hardly imagine that business will have too many opportunities there. But but there might be, yes, there could be, and so if these things are discussed, then it would be beneficial to the business and for regional development to unlock those potentials for regional development, also by being heard when those projects are being discussed, or public-private partnerships are discussed for regional development, let's say, that they actively participate in those, and that also, for example, when it comes to which schools, what kind of educational programs are offered in those regions, so that they actually suit the needs of business, and that also produce workers equipped with qualified workers, which graduates who actually do possess the skills needed in those regions. So I think this would be my contribution to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Dear Boguslav, you have your voice. You seems to be muted. Still, we cannot hear you. We still, yes, maybe now. Not yet.
Not yet?
Not now. Yes. Now we can hear you. Now, yeah.
So what wonders me that all the time I can hear you excellently, and I have no idea what happens to the computer, but frankly speaking, for the first time I use this communicator on my computer, so maybe these are some internal computer problems. So I wanted to say in practice the same what Martin has said, that I see a great potential for cooperation between our enterprises in the case of transboundary, first of all, areas. So this is one thing, and the second thing is that if we want to develop, for example, north-south road connections or railway connections, then there appears a natural space for our enterprises, both state-owned and private, to cooperate. But this is ever the domain of our governments to create some let's say incentives for those enterprises to start cooperating, and not directly telling enterprises you should cooperate. So I agree with my colleagues that as Gyula said, also businesses behave rationally and pragmatically. So this is just the domain of government to create some incentives to encourage them to cooperate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Boguslav. Dear colleagues, I'm afraid we have run out of time. We are over what we have planned quite much. So my apologies not to present further questions. My apologies to our audience. Just maybe one remark that there was a remark what I have seen that from a colleague who have been working on the Visegrad Four cooperation 30 years ago, and he's saying that I think this is stronger than we would have hoped because we are all members of the European Union. I think that's a nice ending of this panel. So, dear colleagues, I would like to say many thanks to you, dear Gyula, Boguslav, Svatya, Martin. I enjoyed very much. I hope you too, and I hope also our audience liked what we exchanged. I also say thanks to Gyula and for the Hungarian Association for having initiated and organizing. Thanks to the office of the association for providing us all the technical help. And what I would like to add is that I hope very much that there will be in the near future further opportunities when we can repeat this, we can meet in person in our physical reality. I'm looking forward to it very much. So, dear presidents, dear colleagues, many thanks. Take care and all the best to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. It was really a joy of being with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for accepting the invitation. And Gabor, thank you very much for this fantastic moderation. And thank you for the audience for